Hare Krishna, dear devotees. Good morning from Sridham Mayapur. Someone told me recently that I should say my name every time before we start. I guess that's to help me so I don't forget it. My name is Madhavananda Das, and this is our daily adventures in Srimad Bhagavatam. Jaya Radha Madhava Jaya Kunja Vihari Jaya Radha Madhava Jaya Gopi Janna Vallabha Jaya Girivardhari Jaya Girivardhari Jaya Gopi Janna Vallabha Girivardhari Jaya Girivardhari Yashodanandana Jaya Vraja Janaranjana Jaya Vraja Jaya Yashodanandana Jaya Vraja Janaranjana Jaya Vraja Jaya Yamuna Tira Vachari Jaya Kunja Jaya Yamuna Tira Vachari Jaya Kunja Jaya Yamuna Tira Vachari Jaya Kunja Jaya Sutimyasam Tato Jayamudiraye Vedi Ramayane Shaiva Purane Vadate Tatam Atavande Chamadye Chaharishavati Diyate Mokam Galadurachalam Vangam Vandayate Giryam Yakripa Tamaham Bande Shri Gurun Dinataranam Paramananda Madhavam Paramananda He Madhava Padunda Luchi Makaranda Se Makaranda Panakori Anande Bolo Hari Hari Harinka Name Vandavela Parikori Chakadona Say Chakaduranka Paraye Manamo Rahu Nirantare Manamo Nirantare Rahu Ha Krishna Boli Jima Jao Ha Krishna Boli Jao Jiva Mote Dara Radha Dara Mote Dara Radha Dara Mote Dara Radha Dara Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Good morning from Sridhar Mayapur, dear devotees. My name is Madhavananda Das. Today we're having our adventures in Srimad Bhagavatam. We're reading from the third canto, chapter 29, which is some of the teachings of Lord Kapila Dev about pure devotional service. And we've been reading from texts number 11 and 12. And today we're going to speak about a really important topic about what in Sanskrit we call ruchi. Ruchi means to have a taste. And how important that taste is, and what is the process for acquiring that taste. So we're going to go ahead and recite the slokas today. Madguna Shuti Matrena Moyi Sarva Guhasaye Manogatira Vichina Yata Gangam Basom Buddho Lakshanam Bhakti Yogasya Nirgunasya Hudaritam Ahoitya Bhavitaya Ahoitya Avyavahita Yabhakti Purushottame. Translation: the manifestation of unadulterated devotional service is exhibited when one's mind is at once attracted to hearing the transcendental name and qualities of the Supreme Personality of Godhead who is residing in everyone's heart. Just as the water of the Ganges flows naturally down towards the ocean, such devotional ecstasy, uninterrupted by any material condition, flows toward the Supreme Lord. I'm going to read a few sentences from Srila Prabhupada's purport. The basic principle of this unadulterated, pure devotional service is love of Godhead. Madguna Shruti Matrena means, quote, just after hearing about the transcendental qualities of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, Prabhupada says another couple sentences later, the flow of the Ganges water cannot be stopped by any condition. Similarly, a pure devotee's attraction for the transcendental name, form, and pastimes of the Supreme Godhead cannot be stopped by any material condition. The word avichina, without interruptions, is very important in this connection. No material condition can stop the flow of the devotional service of a pure devotee. Gora Graganya Gana Gocha Goloruharam Goranga Gudatama Gopyara Kopa Briksham Gopala Gada Ratidam Yati Singha Gora Govinda Deshikavaram Satatam Namami Panchakopa Tarubhishcham Kripa Sindhu Vyevacham Patitanam Pavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Jai Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Shivasari Gaura Bhakta Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare. So, in this section of the Bhagavatam, where Kapila Devi has been speaking about bhakti, what we call saguna bhakti, or bhakti under the modes of material nature, and now finally in texts 11 and 12, he's speaking about what is nirguna bhakti, or bhakti that's freed from these modes. And the first symptom is madguna shruti matrena manora gatir avichina. That just by hearing about Krishna, immediately the mind and heart of such a devotee is immediately attracted to him. And such a devotee goes running there. The example given is the Braj Gopis. When Krishna at Vamsivat began playing on his flute, although some of the gopis were with their husbands, some of their gopis were cooking, some of the gopis were taking care of their babies, some of the gopis, it said, were perhaps breastfeeding a baby, they just threw the baby, I don't know if they actually threw it, but they discarded the child, and they went running to the sound of Krishna's flute. So we've been speaking something about the quality of that bhakti and how we understand it. It's Shastriya Shraddha. It's based on faith in Shastra. And we've been speaking about different types of Shraddha, different types of faith, and how that faith is required to have, to become Saranagati or Saranapati, to practice surrender. And what that Saranagati is, it means that someone is simply rejecting all of the types of spiritual advancement, and they're only taking shelter of Krishna. And the 6 different divisions of surrender, we spoke about that. And then Jiva Goswami, we touched on his Bhakti Sandarbha, Anucheta 237, which is where I'd like to begin with reviewing a little this morning. He says, Tatra yadyapi saranapatyayeva sarvam siddhiti. That it's really good if you do saranagati. Here he calls it saranapati. If you surrender sarvam siddhiti, you can get all different perfections. Tatapi, but Vaishishya lipu shaktis chet tata bhagavat chastro padeshtrinam. Bhagavan mantra upadeshtrinam Vashri Guru Charanam Nityam Eva Visheshata Sevam Kuryat. If you want to relish the mellows of bhakti, then something else has to be there. Not just Saranagati. But you have to constantly, he says, serve both that person who's Bhagavan Mantra Padeshtrinam, who is the giver of mantra to Bhagavan, as well as that personality who is the Siksha Guru, or that person who's teaching us the Shastra. Only by serving such a person can we get such a taste. And so we read a little something from Srila Prabhupada from a lecture speaking about the importance of contemplation as opposed to blind following. Prabhupada said, you should figure out try to argue whether it's true or not. You have to think it over. And he says, well, how has Swamiji discussed this matter? Apply your arguments. Don't just take it as sentiment or blind faith. You've got reasons, you've got arguments, you've got sense. Apply it. Try to understand. Prabhupada's pleading with them. It's so important. Think about what I'm saying. Don't even agree with me. It's okay. There's so many sycophants who say, oh, Swamiji said so. And maybe their purpose in saying that they agree with him is because then everybody will like me and I'll be accepted in the society. Actually, I have some doubts about what he said, but I'm not going to speak about that, because if I speak about it, then I won't be loved. I won't be in that circle of friendship and respect. And so I hide that. And I become a blind, mechanical follower. And you can't progress in bhakti. So, we spoke then, last session on Wednesday, about the importance of this faith and how this faith comes in accordance with the personality that we come in touch with. If someone is a false guru, Prabhupada says, then how can someone keep their faith in that person? Now, then we spoke about what is guru. Tasmad gurumum prapadyeta jignashi shre'utam. This is a qualification of disciple. He should approach guru and he should inquire. And what is guru? Shabde parichanishnatam brahmanupashamashyam. Two qualifications. One is that he knows Shastra. He quotes Shastra. And the second is brahmanupashamashyam. He's situated in that Shastra. He's behaving. He's living that. It's not enough just that we go to a scholar or someone who knows or has a lot of information. Although Shastra is very important. And in the end of our discussion on Wednesday, in response to one of the comments, we cited a very interesting discussion we've been hearing from His Holiness Bhakti Vigyan Maharaj, where he speaks about these three principles. We usually say Guru, Sadhu, and Shastra, but he says that's not the order that Narottam Das Thakur presents them in, and there's a purport to the sequence. He says, first is Sadhu, Shastra, Guru. We have to hear from Sadhu. And what do we hear from Sadhu? Who is a Sadhu? Shabde parichanishnatam. Someone who's absorbed in Shastra. Someone who's going to quote Shastra, because we want to hear from Shastra, because we need Shastriya Shraddha. We don't just need institutional Shraddha, or because the founder Acharya said it, therefore I believe it. But the founder Acharya is saying, don't just believe what I say. You should think about it. You have your doubts. And we should follow what we hear from Shastra. And the Sadhu teaches us that Shastra, and then we know who is Guru by that. And Guru is not just someone who only knows Shastra, but Brahmanupashamashriyam. He's a person who's completely surrendered. So this is very important. This Shraddha is a very, very important thing. And this faith is a very important thing. But in a lecture Srila Prabhupada gave on Nectar Devotion, one of my favorite series of lectures from Srila Prabhupada, in 1972, on October 27th, in Vrindavan, Prabhupada's sitting, we have photos in our ashram of this, Prabhupada's sitting at the Radha Damodar temple, right next to Rupa Goswami, between Rupa Goswami's Samadhi and his Bhajan Kutir. And you can see in front of Srila Prabhupada is a whole row of dandas, looks like a fence or something. It's Prabhupada's most senior preachers that he's speaking to. Because I'm mentioning this because when we quote our Guru Janas, we should understand what they were speaking to who. What is the context? That's also important. So he's speaking to his most senior persons. And what did he tell them in this lecture? He says, this Shraddha has to be increased. The faith has to be increased. Then when you come to the point of Ruchi, Vasudev Kata Ruchi, that's the beginning of our perfection. That's the beginning. Oh, Prabhupada's saying something very, very powerful. In other words, implying that if you don't have this Ruchi, you haven't actually begun yet. And Prabhupada goes on to say, listen carefully, it's one of my favorite quotes, many of you heard me quote this before. At the present moment, there's no Ruchi, no taste. Vasudev Kata Ruchi. There are so many exalted persons. Think about who's sitting in front of him. There are so many exalted persons, but they have no ruchi. They have no taste. They've lost all taste. Vasudev Kata Ruchi. There are two faults. This is very interesting what he's speaking. Now he's speaking to his topmost preachers in the movement. Prabhupada says there are two faults. First thing he says, either people could not preach properly. And then he says, so they could not create taste of the people in general. In other words, preaching properly means to create taste in people. And Prabhupada says, it's not the fault of the people in general. I think about so many times I've been out there on book distribution, and that, especially in different parts of Los Angeles, especially if you go to some place where the devotees have been 100,000 million times, and you go out there, oh my God, these people are so bad. They're so nonsense. And once we were at the Santa Monica DMV, and I was showing a book to someone and talking to them about it. It was going really good. And all of a sudden, out of the back of my eye, I saw a fist coming, and someone just decided to bless me. They were watching me distributing books to this fellow, and they came and just punched me in the head, knocked me down on the ground. And I was a fanatic. I just jumped up and turned to the first person I saw. I gave them a book. I wasn't going to become discouraged. But sometimes we think, these people are not good. This is not a good place. Prabhupada says it's not the fault of the people in general. It's the fault of the so-called preachers. Ooh. And then why? Prabhupada says, because they could not create taste. And because they could not create taste, it means they wanted to take the place of Krishna. Oh, that's a really strong thing to say, isn't it? Now, if you go around and ask every devotee you meet, how many of you want to take the place of Krishna? I think it's very few people who are going to raise their hand. Maybe a few honest and humble souls. But most devotees, I don't think they will. Prabhupada says their purpose was they wanted to take the place of Krishna. And Prabhupada says, imitation Krishna, imitation God, that will not do. Now let's pick this apart a little bit. What is Prabhupada saying here? Who is he speaking to? What does he mean? It's not the fault of the people, it's the fault of the preachers, because they could not create a taste. And if you can't create taste, if you don't have taste, Prabhupada's saying, then you can't create it, and it means you're going to want to take the place of Krishna. Either directly or indirectly, that's going to be your purpose. Maybe you'll do that in the form of, I want to be the biggest collector today, the biggest book distributor today. Krishna's the only big collector. Krishna's the only big book distributor. He's doing everything. And if we think like that, we're not going to be able to create taste. And if you speak to any book distributor, any preacher, they'll tell you what happens when you go out there like that. And you start thinking, this is the first person. I'm going to give them a book. That's one book. There's another, there's number 2 over there. I've got them lined up, and that's going to be number 2 book, and there's number 3. And instead of treating them as a person with love and respect as a spirit soul, they've become numbers. Something for you to enjoy. And the first person that I went to, they took a book, and the second person took a, and the third person punched me in the nose. I can't figure out why. Because people are not so stupid. When they don't like to be treated like a number. So if we act like that, it's not the fault of the people, it's the fault of the so-called preachers. If we can't create a taste in them, make them happy. This happiness in Bhakti Bhajan is our everything. It only comes in Bhakti Bhajan. Prabhupada writes in a purport in Bhagavatam, Canto 2, Chapter 3, Text 10. He says that Jiva Goswami has explained desirelessness as bhajaniya parama purusha sukha mata swa sukhadvam. This means that one can feel happy only by experiencing the happiness of the Supreme Lord. So in this verse that we've been reading from, these verses from 11th and 12th verses, it's being described that this pure bhakti is avyavahita. It's not separate from the Lord. And so they have some happiness. So this is the secret to happiness. we give up our happiness. And we think of the happiness of other people. And especially we think of the happiness of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. So real happiness means when we do bhajan. That gives us happiness. Prabhupada translates, it means one should feel happy only by experiencing the happiness of the Supreme Lord. In the Chaitanya Charitamrita, on Chilila chapter 1, in text 101, it's described how we should learn about the holy name, how we should taste the holy name. Krishna namera mahima shastra sadhu mukhi jani namera madhuri aiche kahanahi shuni. Prabhupada translates this. One has to learn, like there's no other choice. One has to learn about the beauty and transcendental position of the holy name of the Lord by hearing the revealed scriptures from the mouths of devotees. So again, this point is there. Shastra, sadhu, guru. We want to hear Shastra. This is the obligation of the devotees in our movement. Srila Prabhupada in 1977, when he came to Bhubaneswar in one room conversation, he said that the function of the guru is sampradaya rakshana, to protect the sampradaya. And the way that's done is by quoting Shastra. And I'll tell you a little something. In Bhagavad Gita, there is nowhere in the entire book where it says that one should surrender everything, give up all types of religion and surrender to me, and I'll protect you from all types of sin. That's not found anywhere in the entire Bhagavad Gita. Nowhere. Because that's English. And in the Bhagavad Gita, Krishna speaks in Sanskrit. Krishna does say, Sarva dharmam pratyega mamekam sharanam braja. And we should quote that. Our Guru Maharaj once said, much to the consternation, I think, of many of the devotees who are listening, he told us, he said, if you can't quote Shastra, don't tell them you're my disciple. It was a little bit of a shock. Here in West Bengal, when His Holiness Bhakti Charu Maharaj had translated Srila Prabhupada's Bhagavad Gita, the BBT decided that the first edition they would print would be just the translations only to save some money. And that was printed, and it was appreciated by many people, but there were a group of pundits who came and they complained to the BBT. They said, you can say this is a book about the Bhagavad Gita, but this is not the Bhagavad Gita. Because the Bhagavad Gita is in Sanskrit. It begins, Dharma Chaiti Kurukshetra Samaveda Yutsava. That's Bhagavad Gita. This is some Bengali book which speaks about Bhagavad Gita. We should understand the difference between translation and the original. Sometimes devotees say there's no difference. If there's no difference, then why is it that in one purport in Chaitanya Charitamrita, Srila Prabhupada writes that devotees should learn Bengali to relish Chaitanya Charitamrita, if there's no difference. There's a difference between a translation and the original. So we want to hear Shastra. We should quote Sanskrit to the best of our ability. In his purport to this verse from Chaitanya Charitamrita, Srila Prabhupada gives a very powerful explanation. He says, it's said in the Padma Purana, Tashi Krishna Namadi Nabhavidrayam Indriyai. Doesn't give a translation. We'll come back to this verse. Chanting and hearing of the transcendental holy name of the Lord cannot be performed by the ordinary senses. That's a general translation. The transcendental vibration of the Lord's holy name is completely spiritual. Thus, it must be received from spiritual sources and must be chanted after having been heard from a spiritual master. One who hears the chanting of the Hare Krishna mantra must, he doesn't say might, he says must receive it from the spiritual master by oral reception. Srila Sanatana Goswami has forbidden us to hear the holy name of Krishna chanted by non-Vaishnavas, such as professional actors and singers, for it will have no effect. So, Atashi Krishna Namadi Nabhavid Grayam Indriyai. With your indriya means your knowledge acquiring senses, Ata, beginning with Sri Krishna, Krishna himself, Nama, his name, Adi means etc. Beginning with, to understand Krishna, to perceive Krishna, it's not possible with our senses. We can't perceive Krishna, we can't perceive his name, we can't perceive his abode, we can't perceive his Shastra, we can't understand anything. It must be done through the medium of the devotee. And Srila Prabhupada speaking about this point here. This verse is an interesting verse. It says, Ata Shri Krishna Namadi Nabhavid Gram. And yet, the next line, which Srila Prabhupada doesn't quote, but he indirectly refers to, Seva Mukhi Jiva Do Swayameva Spuratyada. So, okay, all right, already. I can't understand Krishna or his name and with my senses. So what am I supposed to do? The next line says, Seva Mukhi Jiva Do Swayameva Spuratyada. Swayameva Spuratyada, it becomes manifest with when you use your tongue. Jiva means the tongue. Well, excuse me, but jiva is one of the knowledge acquiring senses, and we just heard Nabhavedgraim Indriyai. You can't understand it with your senses. The significant word in this verse, as indicated by Srila Prabhupada, it must be received from spiritual sources and must be chanted after having been heard from a spiritual master. That's sevanmukhi. That's doing service with the mouth. After we've heard it, we can't chant it on our own, but when we do it as a service, Tate Krishna Bhaji Kore Guru Sevan. Chaitanya Charitamrita says that my Krishna Bhajan, it's not actually Krishna Bhajan. It's actually Guru Seva. And what is my Guru Seva? It's Krishna Bhajan. That's how I please my Guru Deva. So it's required to have this ruchi, this taste. But this taste comes in association with devotees by hearing Krishna Katha. You know this verse. Bhaktim mohu prabhahatam tvahine prasango bhuyarananta mahatam amalasayanam yenanjalo sabana uru vasambhavabdhim yesye bhavad guru guna katamrita panamata. This is a prayer by Dhruva Maharaj. Very startling prayer. 4th Canto Bhagavatam, Canto chapter 9, text 11. He prays, oh my dear Lord, you're Ananta, you're unlimited. He says, my dear Lord, what do I want? I want Tvai Prasanga. Muhu Pravahatam Tvai Me Prasanga. I want constantly to associate with your great devotees. And by associating with these devotees, the Nishay Bhavat, I'll cross over this Bhavabdudim, this ocean of material existence. And how will I do it? He says, Bhavad Guna Katamrita Panamata. I'm by drinking the nectar of your pastimes in association with the devotees. Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur comments on this verse, Sa chashravana kirtanadi moyi bhakti satsangam vina nasurasi bhavatiti satsangam pratayate. That bhakti, even if you're hearing and chanting, it says vina nasurasi. There's no sweetness to it. If there's no satsangam vina. If there's no devotees there. It's nice, we go and we sit by ourselves and we read Bhagavad Gita. But the real sweetness comes when we associate with the devotees. And there's paraspara, there's some back and forth, there's some discussion on things. So therefore, he says, Bhaktim Tvai Pravahatam Pravaha Rupena Chit Ameva Dadatam. Therefore, Dhruva prays for the association of devotees who are always performing Pravahatam, always performing this bhakti. This is Madguna Shruti Matrena Manor Gatir Avichina. It's continuous. He wants to associate with people who are always eager to hear and chant about Krishna. Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur, he says some very strong things in his purport. He says, Dhruva goes on to say, Sabu Jasfukta Maha Jaina Mahat Sangha Balena. He says, he raises his hands in the air And he says, by the strength of that association, Mahat Sangha Bhalena, Udvanamapi, Bahu Vyasana, Yuttamapi, Bhavabdin Neshe Grahishyami. He says, I'll overcome the ocean, this terrible ocean of material life, which is full of countless pains, by the strength of that association. And Dhruva says, let it come. Let it come. Bring it on. We don't recommend you pray like this. Okay, Maya Devi, give me your best shot. Not highly recommended. But Dhruva's saying like this. He said, let it come before me. Let's see. And he says, Vishwanath's describing Dhruva Maharaj's mood. Nothing is impossible for me because, and he says, Matam dukkhayitam satmudha. Mata means I become a drunkard. I become completely drunk, tasting the nectar of your qualities and pastimes in association with those devotees. And he says, and because of that, because pibatam prasamam, pibatam means to drink, Vishnu says, because I've been drinking that, then napi nityamritam, I'm not afraid of death. I've drunk this nectar, which is nityamritam. It's immortal. By doing this with the devotees, tatra satsangutayaiva bhaktya bhagavantam sakshad kripyati puna satsangasya, I directly associate with the Lord. I directly meet him. And he says all the different nasty things in this world, rivalry, ignorance, envy, hatred, they can't make this drunkard suffer. We like speaking on this verse. Some of you heard us speak about this before. How the nature of a drunkard. Sometimes we used to do Harinam in downtown Los Angeles, and he made a lot of drunkards there. And the drunkard, he's such an easygoing person, sometimes. But the nature of a drunkard is you can come and say some really bad thing to me. Your mother. Say something terrible about his mother, and he just laughs. You can punch him in the nose, he just laughs. You can do it because he's drunk. And so similarly, Dhruva Maharaj is saying, because I'm drunk, I'm completely intoxicated by hearing and chanting about you, then I'm untouched by all this suffering and misery and envy and hatred in the material world. This is a secret, by the way, of how to survive in the institution. It's the only way. We have to drink this nectar. That's the whole purpose of this movement. Drink this nectar. It's meant to be drunk. He says, by this association with the devotees, then one directly meets the Supreme Lord. And then what happens after that? Pratana bhakti karanamapi bhakti phalamapi swayam bhaktirapi satsanga iti bhaktanam mattam vyanjitam. You meet Krishna, and then after you meet Krishna, then what do? Dear Krishna, please give me association with the devotees. Tulayama lavena pi nasragam na punarbhavam bhagavat sangi sangasya martinam kimutasi. So the Prachetas in 4th canto of the Bhagavatam, this is their prayer. When Lord Vishnu came and said, yo dude, what do you want? You guys are praying to me, what do you want? And they said, Tulayama lavena pi. We don't need any of this stuff. Nasragam, na punarbhavam. We're not asking to go to the heavenly planets. Na punarbhavam. We're not even asking to become liberated. All that we want, Bhagavat Sangi Sangasya. We want something much, much, much better than that stupid liberation. Which Mukti tu chafolahoy namabasa hoite. Chaitanya Charitamrita says that is the insignificant fruit of even namabas. We don't care about liberation. We want association with the devotees. Because in that association, we get everything. In the association with such devotees, we can see how they're relishing such an important thing. So there's a nice story we'd like to conclude with our session today. This is from a book we often speak from, the Bhaktamala by Nabadas. Yeah, we'll tell this story. I was thinking of another story, but this is not from the Bhakta Mala of Navadas. This is a story, a local story from Gokul, from Braj, local tradition. They say this took place in the late 1700s. And there was one lady whose name was Anandi Bai, and she lived near Gokul in Braj. And this poor woman was so ugly that anybody who saw her, any children, anybody saw, they'd start crying. They'd run the other way. She was a horrendously ugly woman. Now somehow, she had an arranged marriage, and her husband never saw her before the marriage. His parents just arranged the marriage, and then when he saw her, oh my God, thank you very much, forget it, we're getting divorced. So he left her, and he went and married another woman. But Anandi Bai, she was a devotee, and she wasn't disturbed by that because she's becoming intoxicated, just drinking the nectar of Krishna's name and hearing Krishna Katha. What an insult. Your husband meets you and says, oh my God, forget it. I'm not going to be married to you. And he just leaves her. So she just decided, anyway, I'm just going to stay in this wonderful place of Gokul and do my bhajan. And she had a deity there of Krishna. And she would talk to that deity every morning and evening. And with that deity, he was her friend. She didn't take shelter of anybody else. She didn't even take shelter of her girlfriends, which is usually the system for ladies when they're insulted or something. But whatever emotions, whatever feelings she had, she would share with that deity of Krishna. And then every day she would go to hear the Krishna Katha of the sadhus. She would pull a cloth over her face so she wouldn't scare anybody. And she would sit and hear the Katha. And so this way she was passing her life. Now once they had some Krishna Lila drama. And they were selecting different people to play different roles for the drama. This is one of the most wonderful aspects of Vedic and Vaishnava culture, these dramas. And you see that the tradition, they have them. It's a big topic. We like speaking about this drama. The traditions are very old in different parts of India. And they always have wonderful Krishna Lila, Ram Lila, sometimes Gora Lila. And so when they were selecting people to play different roles, Anandi Bai was also present. And so they wanted to have a drama about Krishna going into Mathura. And they had to find someone who's going to play the role of Kubja. And so at that time, Anandi Bai's ex-husband was there with his wife and new wife and children. It had been some years. And so he decided he was going to make fun of Anandi Bai. And so he said, she's the best person to play Kubja. You should get Anandi Bai to do that. And the persons who were the organizers of the drama, he said, yeah, actually she's pretty good for it. I think you're right. And although she was being made fun of, she was being ridiculed, Anandi Bai was intoxicated by hearing Krishna Katha. And she was so happy. Oh, I get to be in the drama. This is so wonderful. I can serve Krishna by being in this drama in this way. So all that making fun of her just rolled right off of her because she's intoxicated. And they gave the role of Krishna to an 8-year-old boy. And so then she went back home that day. And she was looking at her deity, speaking to him a little differently. She's thinking, oh, my Krishna is going to come. He's going to press my toes with his toes and lift my chin and ask me to look up. And she was meditating so deeply in this way in the drama. And so then finally the day of the drama arrived, and there was a huge crowd of people watching the drama. And Krishna entered into Mathura, and he meets Kubja on the way. And so at that time, the young boy who was playing Krishna came near Anandi Bai, and he put his foot on her foot and lifted her chin. And at that time, an amazing thing happened. Suddenly, Anandi Bai became completely beautiful. I mean, she was like Miss India, Miss Universe. And all the men who were there became stunned. And the guy who had left her before looked at his new wife and, what did I do? Everybody was completely astonished. And Anandibai didn't even notice. Because she's intoxicated. She's just completely absorbed. Manmana bhava mad bhakto madhyaji mam namaskuru. Krishna in the Gita says, you become absorbed in thinking of me. That's nirguna bhakti. And so such a person, their physical body may look in a certain way, but they don't even notice it. People may make fun of them. They don't even notice it because they're completely absorbed in Krishna. When the news spread what had happened to Anandibai, people came from all over. But Anandibai said, no. And she just went back home and I have my husband. My husband's Krishna. And she just worshipped Krishna even more. And then sometimes when people would come to Anandibai and say, what happened to you? I mean, nothing personal, but you were uglier than a dog before, and now you're just like, to use a colloquial expression, modern colloquial, you're hot. I mean, you're really beautiful. And Anandibai would say, I don't know. Krishna knows everything. I don't know. And Anandibai, she wrote a little letter she sent by the post to her ex-husband, and she thanked him. It was by your mercy that I got to be part of this drama. It was by your mercy that I got to serve Krishna because you suggested it to me. Even though he was actually just trying to make fun of her. And so this is the nature of pure bhakti. The devotee who's hearing Krishna Katha, they become completely intoxicated and they get such ruchi by association with the devotees. Now I was thinking that we were going to have maybe 3 more sessions to these 2 verses, but I think now we're going to have probably 4. But we're going to kind of space it out a little bit because our next katha will be on Sunday, and that'll be also on this verse. But then our normal Wednesday katha is going to be Janmashtami. And we're going to have a special talk that day about who is really Krishna's mother. And then our next discussion will be on Friday the 14th, and we'll continue this with this verse from the Bhagavatam. So I want to stop there. I'd like to ask the devotees what you're walking away with, what you appreciated today, because there should be some paraspara. As Prabhupada told the devotees early in 26 Second Avenue, don't just accept it because Swamiji says it, but you should think about it. Why did he say this? What does it mean? So we can ask the devotees now if they have any reflections or questions, comments like that. There's nothing online. Anybody here have any reflections or anything on the Payani? What are you walking away with today? As Vaisheshika Babu, our dear friend, says sometimes, what did you win today? What are you taking with you?
Thank you so much. For me, it was so important to hear about this verse, Rakshi Krishna Namadi, because I many times heard this, but today I finally understand that although we cannot perceive this transcendental knowledge by our senses, so the way is just to hear and repeat what we heard, just to understand it deeply. Thank you so much. Although you spoke about this so many times, but I didn't connect it with this verse before. Yeah, this was so important, and also, and of course I like this verse from Dhruva Maharaj. Bhakti Pravahata. Yeah, and the story of Anandabai is also so amazing, just illustrating how we just have to be absorbed in this nectar of Krishna Katha and Krishna service to Krishna and devotees association and other things. They will come. It's not that we have to do some extra endeavors to get something if we don't have something, but if we sincerely observed, everything have come. Although theoretically, I really like this.
The Bhagavatam 11th Canto says that harsh words of criticism, when someone makes fun of us, they're arrows which penetrate the heart. They're worse than normal arrows. And this story to me means so much that for a woman, her beauty is very important for her. I mean, I've seen so many devotee ladies, and they understand I'm not my body, but still they like to be beautiful, isn't it? Every girl likes to be beautiful. That Prabhupada says in one place that that's the opulence of a woman. So don't take that away from her. They should be beautiful. And for a woman to be made fun of like this, it's such a painful thing. But she's completely impervious to it. Amazing. So we have a question. Could you please explain a little bit about sadhus when we say snigdha and svajatiya? What should we understand by these two terms? So Rupa Goswami, in his Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu, he says, svajati ashaya snigdha sadhu sangasato vare, that we should associate in a certain way, but first of all, the person should be svajatiya. My Guru Maharaj explained this word svajatiya, svajati, meaning literally from the same caste, or he explained it as being from the family of Srila Prabhupada, or the family, whatever family your guru is in. If you're in another line of Gaudiya Vaishnavism, there's different devotees watching these classes. We appreciate that. You should be svajatiya. We should stay within that family. And they should be, svajatiya, they should be snigdha. They should be affectionate to us. Even if they're more advanced, sadhu, Guru Maharaj explained, means someone who's more advanced. That's a very simple definition. Someone who's more advanced than me, that can help me. But they also need to be snigdha, because sometimes some sadhus are a little bit angry. Gorkishore Babaji sometimes is a bit of an angry person, and it was hard for people to approach him to get his mercy. So even though you may be in contact with such an elevated person, you don't get benefit if they're not snigdha, if they're not affectionate to us also. So that reason. Shamapriya, do you want to share with us what you're walking away with today? Okay. This is our daily program. We like to hear from the devotees back and forth. That's Paraspara Nikatanam. It's really important. Shamapriya.
Hare Krishna, thank you. Very, very nice, very interesting. And I like very much about how you said that the devotees, we need to create taste, that it's the duty of devotees to create taste in others, and that we really need to find different ways to create that taste so that people get relief from the material suffering.
Such a nice point, thank you. But how do we create taste? Well, we're hearing in this discussion today, taste is created in loving association with devotees. So when we meet someone, we can't just say, excuse me, sir, would you like to come to the kirtan today? Excuse me, sir, would you like to come and hear Krishna Katha? They're going to leave me alone, go away. But rather we approach them and say, excuse me, I was just watching you and I saw you look like a real thinker. And I think you might really appreciate it. We say something appreciative, we say something loving to them, because that's the nature of relationships. We appreciate them in some way. And by that appreciation, they feel love. And then they're pulled in a little bit, and they get some ruchi, because everybody likes to be appreciated. They said, you tell them, I've been out here all day, and I've met so many people, and honestly speaking, don't mind me saying, but you look like the most intelligent person I've seen out here all day. And that person gets so much ruchi from that, isn't it? Oh, yes, they understand my position. Only if it's real, Krishna Kun's saying. Yes, that's a fact. If we say it and it seems cheap, or it's a great offense, it's a great insult, then they punch you in the nose. But if they really feel like you're being sincere, that you really love them and appreciate them, wow, they get so much ruchi from that. So that ruchi is such an important thing. Sachitananda, do you want to share with us what you're walking away with today? Krishna Kun, do you have anything? Okay, it's okay. You have something?
Hariva Prabhu, thank you. Today I sat far away and I'm getting deaf, so I couldn't hear properly. Maybe I didn't hear properly. Can you please repeat again and maybe explain a little bit the difference when you said in the Bhagavad Gita there's no such a thing as when you say Sarva Dharmam Parijaya Mamikam Saranambhaya.
That's there.
Yeah,
No
the Sanskrit.
Abandon all the varieties of religion.
So is it Sanskrit and the translation or something? Maybe you can say.
So just our point is that we should quote Shastra. And quoting Shastra does not mean, of course, we may give the purport to it. Translation's a kind of purport. When we say, abandon all varieties of religion and just surrender to me, Krishna says this, and that's the purport of what Krishna says. But what Krishna directly says is not English. Krishna never spoke in English, the Bhagavad Gita. Krishna said, sarva dharman parityaga. And the reason I'm stressing that is because we should quote Shastra. It's such an important thing. People should have Shastriya Shraddha. And they get that Shastriya Shraddha when they see how important it is. And therefore, in Bhubaneswar in 1977, Srila Prabhupada was speaking about this, how this is Sampradaya Rakshana, how we protect our Sampradaya by quoting Shastra. If we just abandon all the Sanskrit and we just give a translation, it may be problematic. I'll give you an example. The verse, Bhayam Dvitiya Binivesita Shat. I know of at least 4 different translations by Srila Prabhupada. And those 4 different translations are quite different. Very, very different to that one verse. So it's not enough just to quote a translation or an idea of something. That's helpful, that's good. And that's some authorization. But the best thing is we should quote the Sanskrit. And therefore Prabhupada gave us that and stressed that. I'm just mentioning it because sometimes devotees become a little lazy and they say things like, in the Bhagavad Gita, Krishna says, abandon all varieties of religion and surrender to me. But Krishna does not say that in Bhagavad Gita. Krishna says, sarva dharman parityagya. We should learn Sanskrit like that. That was my point. Is that okay?
The translation in English is similar to what it says in Sanskrit.
The translation, I mean, you know better than me because you're bilingual, you're becoming trilingual, I think now studying Bengali. But therefore, Srila Prabhupada, he said that devotees, if they really want to relish Chaitanya Charitamrita, they need to read Bengali. Isn't it? If you really, you're from Mexico, if you really want to understand Mexican culture, I can read a book about it, I can eat lots of tacos and enchiladas, I can, wear a sombrero, I can do this or that, but I'm not going to understand Mexican culture until I learn the language. And the subtlety in the language, there's so much there. And although someone can translate for me, I can go with a translator to Mexico and it's not the same. And I'm going to miss the sweetness, I'm going to miss the subtle nuances of exchanges between people. That was our point. Not to discourage English translation. And we had one friend, I remember in Los Angeles, one black-bodied devotee friend, he used to memorize not just the translations, but he memorized the purports. Srila Prabhupada was wonderful. And that's such a great thing to do. Highly recommended. But we should also do a little work and learn the Sanskrit. Okay? Okay, thank you all very much. So we will be back again, just to go over our points, on Sunday, the 10th, the 9th. And then on next Wednesday, we'll have a Janmashtami Katha in the morning. And we'll have a Russian translation at the same time for that, because we'll be speaking for some devotees in Uzbekistan and Kazakhstan. Grantara Srimad Bhagavatam Ki Jai, Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai, Gopremanandi Hari Hari Bo, Vanshakalpadarubhascha